Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for joining us. My name is Elizabeth Hagedorn. I cover the State Department for Our Monitor, and it is my pleasure to be moderating this discussion today, which will examine the unsustainability of the camps and prisons that are home to some 12,000 suspected ISIS fighters in Syria and some 60,000 women and children who live in a state of legal limbo. First, I will introduce our terrific panel that we have here today. Directly next to me is Sonia Kush. She is the she is the Syria Response Director at Save the Children. Next, we have Sahar Atrash. She is the Senior Advocate for the Middle East at Refugees International. Then we have Fabrizio Carboni, the Regional Director for the Middle East at the International Committee of the Red Cross. And finally, Letta Taylor is an Associate Director and the Counterterrorism Lead in the Crisis and Conflict Division of Human Rights Watch. We'll begin with a discussion here on the stage, and then we'll save about 15 or so minutes at the end for your questions in the audience and also for those who are watching virtually. But first, I'd like to give our panelists a few minutes to make some opening remarks. And I think we'll kind of go down the line here. And Sonia, we'll start with you.
So thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks to MBI for hosting this important event today. So just as background, Save the Children delivers programs in Al-Hol and Roj camps and in several detention facilities in Northeast Syria that hold children. You know, the physical conditions of the camps, I think, have been very well documented over the years, so I'm not going to go into those today. What I'd rather talk about is the impact of the conditions in the camps on the mental health of children. So let me do that by giving you a few examples. 8-year-old Sarah is from Australia. She lives in Roj camp with her family. And the last time I went into Roj and met her mother told me that Sarah had said she couldn't bear life in the camp anymore, and that she had asked her mother, what are the different ways that I can kill myself? We had a boy in the Huri Center who, when he went to the barber to get his haircut, he grabbed a pair of scissors and started stabbing himself. We've had children in Al-Hol camp tell us that they can't sleep at night because they're afraid that someone is going to come into their tent and kill them. We have children who just live in constant state of anxiety and have nightmares because of everything they've witnessed, including killings and beheadings. So you can get a sense that these camps are just full of constant stress and anxiety and violence. You know, this has short-term impacts on the well-being of children, but it also affects their long-term emotional and psychological development. So these children are just trapped with very few outlets for help and support. We had a case of 2 foreign boys who live in Gueran or Hasakeh prison, who told me that they spend their days recounting the plots of Avenger movies in a way to just keep their minds active and give them some kind of relief and respite from the horrific physical conditions that they live in. So when we consider the topic of this session, you know, what needs to change? What needs to change is that we need to get those children out of the camps and the prisons that they're living in. We need all parties, all countries, all entities in Northeast Syria to abide by international human rights law and standards that human rights organizations and humanitarian organizations like ourselves have all signed up to. We need those laws to be respected, and that means getting children home. We actually know that when children do get repatriated and they leave the camps and go home, there's a lot of hope for them to have a normal life. We had a case of, a German woman sent us an email recently telling us about her grandson, Zaid, who was repatriated from Northeast Syria about 2 years ago. He had been living under Save the Children's care in Al-Hol camp. And she told us, like, he's doing great. He's going to school, he's getting psychological support, he's playing soccer, and he loves his little cat. And, you know, she acknowledged it's really hard work for him to have a normal life and make him happy again, but we're really doing our best, and he's going to thrive and make it. So we've seen some good momentum on repatriation from the camps, most recently with several European countries, and also with the government of Iraq taking back more than 200 teenage boys from prisons in Northeast Syria. This is great, but we really need that momentum to continue. The rising violence in Al-Hol, and which is on the news every day, it's unsustainable, and children can't ever escape from this constant stress and pressure that they're under. It just means they're reliving their trauma and anxiety over and over again on a daily basis. So our recommendations and how things really need to change is one, that all parties need to abide by international human rights law and standards. Two, we need to remember and keep at the forefront of our minds that these children are victims of the conflict. They are not the next resurgence of ISIS in Northeast Syria. They're children. Let's not stigmatize them and tar them all with the ISIS brush. And three, let's remember our own humanity at the end of the day. I'll leave you with the words of some teenage boys in Gueran prison. Every time our teams go in, they get asked the same thing by the boys. The boys say, we've been in here for 3 years. We have no contact with our families. We have no idea even where our families are. What is the plan for us? And those boys deserve an answer.
Okay, so I'll continue from where Sonia ended. And, you know, I think what we need is really a change in the approach. I think when anyone hears about Al-Hol is mostly when there's a security incident. I think, you know, like this has been the focus. And I think what mostly need to change is this very security focused approach on Al-Hol camp. We really need to start looking at Al-Hol from a different perspective, looking at it from a humanitarian and a human perspective. And of course, there's the issue of children, but there's also the other issue of families, of women. And I think it's very important to stress that, you know, there's not a one, you know, solution fits all when it comes to women inside Al-Hol camp. And there's this tendency, you know, even here, you know, within, you know, the US debate to just lump everybody in one basket, which is not the case. Inside Al-Hol, there are so Syrians, there are Iraqis, and there are foreign fighters. And within each of these groups, there are different subgroups. And within the subgroups, there are even nuances. So there are the so-called families of ISIS. And there are, you know, non-families. So people who fled the battles, who are civilians, you know, who found themselves, you know, trapped in the conflict. But even when we talk about family of ISIS, there needs to be a deeper discussion about who the people we are talking about, you know, the women and even the children, you know. So I feel like there has been some research even about the foreign fighters, you know, not all of them have chosen or you know, some who've been smuggled or, you know, victim of smuggling, or other who've came here because of, you know, when they were teenagers. So I think we really need to start thinking deeper about all these different nuances within the camp. Other issues are related to the broader context within Syria. I don't think we can really resolve the situation inside Al-Hol if we don't start looking at the situation outside Al-Hol, you know, whether it's in the northeast, and there is Zura and Raqqa and other places, but also the broader. And I don't want to make this impossible, but just to say that, you know, and I think, you know, my colleagues, probably Sonia and ICRC, who work in the camps, know that people sometimes, families choose not to leave the camp, not because, you know, they come from areas who've been retaken, for example, by the regime, but just because they don't have nowhere to go, because their home have been destroyed, or simply because if they leave the camp, they are not certain that they can sustain themselves and their families. So I think all these, you know, conditions, we really need to look at them. And as Sonia said, you know, from a humanitarian and from the international humanitarian law, and tackle all these conditions if we really want to find solutions for the camps. I think we'll have the chance to talk about, you know, reintegration, repatriation. I'm sure we're going to tackle all these issues. I'll stop here, but I wanted just to, you know, make these few initial comments.
A lot of ground was already covered. I mean, is this situation sustainable? And I want to share with you a bit our experience. I mean, yes. So Northeast Syria is a front line. Okay. Northeast Syria is not a peaceful place. You know, Northeast Syria, and especially if we look at the camp of Al-Hol, is on the front line. You have Turkish forces, Kurdish forces, US troops, British, Iranians, you